So when they qualified in December of last year, we delivered the qualifying signatures to the Secretary of State, and again the left wing in Olympia laughed and they said, well, that's funny. The signatures may all be fake. We don't believe it. We're not going to, these things aren't going to go anywhere. They're not going to get a hearing in the legislature. They're not going to do anything. They were initiatives, I drafted them as initiatives to the legislature, specifically to shine a light on my colleagues in Olympia for having passed the bad bills that they were fixing, and not giving them any quarter to hide. Now, some smart people, even some smart Republicans said, well, you've overestimated it, Jim. They're not going to give them hearings. Even if what you say is true, that you're trying to put pressure on them to highlight their bad votes previous, that's exactly why they're not going to even pretend they exist. They're going to ignore them completely, which the legislature is allowed to do with an initiative of the legislature. But if the legislature ignores an initiative of the legislature completely, the initiative goes to the next general election ballot for the people to vote on. That was the real hook. That was the lever that I wanted to use in the next legislative session, which is the one that started January this year. These 6 initiatives all polled at almost unbelievable levels of popular support. The weakest of them polls at about 70% support in Washington. The strongest, which was the police pursuit restoration, it scored like 90% support. Numbers so high in polling, you even doubt them because they're too high. And the support crosses all demographic lines. Republican and Democrat. Democrats support the initiatives. Gender, all 56 genders, all support these initiatives. All racial, ethnic breakdowns across all the demographic lines. Support for these initiatives is well over 60%, and even higher in many cases. And while the Speaker of the House in Olympia, now this is not DC, a woman by the name of Lori Jenkins, who's out of Tacoma, initially took a very hard and sarcastic line about how these initiatives were dead on arrival, wouldn't be heard in the legislature. Well, then they started seeing the polling numbers, and they realized, oh, well, if we ignore these initiatives in the legislature, they're all going to be on the ballot in November of 2024, and they're polling at 80 or 90% support. So people are going to turn up and vote for these initiatives, and then they're going to vote for conservatives all the way down the ballot. We don't want these things on the November ballot, so maybe we will give them hearings, and maybe we will vote them into law as the legislature so that they're not on the ballot in November of 2024. And it was very edifying for me to watch the little wheels turn and for them to figure out it was worse for these to be on the ballot in November than to pass them into law, even though they hated them. They had to pass at least some of them into law. And so they came up with this strategy. Basically, they split the baby. They decided 3 they would give hearings to and votes, and 3 they would ignore and let go to the ballot this November. If you've read the Bible, you know the split the baby thing is a losing strategy. Nevertheless, that's what they did. So they gave the hearings and eventually votes in the legislature to the Restoring Police Pursuits, the Parents' Bill of Rights, and the prospective no state income tax. Those 3 got hearings and votes. The other 3, repealing the cap and trade, repealing capital gains, and the opt-out on the long-term care benefit, those they ignored. And notice that the ones they ignored were the most specific tax-related initiatives. So that shows you what they really care about is money, not pure policy. The other ones were more pure policy.